Alright, after the upcoming games video on Saturday, a lot of people were mentioning a game called Deflector and they wanted us to talk about it, and then we were sent an email from the publisher wanting us to cover it. So we have, and we're also giving away a copy. All you need to do is let us know in the comments what your favourite roguelite is. The addiction is about to begin. Hi everyone, welcome back to SwitchUp and to a little special edition of our Addictive Games series looking at the new game that we saw on Glen's upcoming games list called Deflector.
Yep, the publishers of this game asked if we'd have a look at it, and as big fans of roguelites and hack and slash games, which is essentially what this is, we were happy to do so, and we're glad we did, because it's very good.
Yeah, really enjoyable game. We're going to go through all the details. So, Deflector, what's it all about, and why is it so addictive? Well, let's find out. So this is the first major project from the small team from Barcelona known as Arrow Fist Games. I think they started work in 2020 where they were selected as one of the 5 studios to join the 5th incubation period program of Gamecom of Game BCN in Spain. They originally released it on Steam to much acclaim and now it's coming to the Nintendo Switch.
In terms of story, basically you are trying to fight off a virus. You are created to do just a thing, and this basically equates to going on runs, trying to fight off the virus. Every time you die, you've learnt more about it, which you then bring back to base. And again, this is how you gain your meta progression across each run.
Yeah, it's not a deep storyline, I'd say, but it is quite clear what you're trying to do. And it's also tied into all the upgrades and abilities that you'll get. There's always mention of either mutations or fighting the virus and gaining the game's currency.
So in terms of how that works, then every time you do start a run, you'll be placed on a map, a bit like something like Bad North, where you'll need to move across it, and each of the tiles that you fall on will tell you exactly what you're in for as you enter that arena. So it could well be that you need to survive for a certain amount of time. It could just be destroying all enemies, or it could obviously be a boss tile and you'll be taken to fight said boss.
So before any of that, you actually have a hub area and you can choose one of the stages. Now we discovered that these aren't all created equally, and they seem to range from slightly easier all the way to the brutally difficult, and they'll have different features. Things like different enemy types, different hazards in some of those areas that we'll talk about, and obviously a different aesthetic.
That's right. Now, as you go along each tile of your run, you will be offered certain perks that you could gain by accomplishing your task in that particular tile. So it could well be that you're offered a mutation. Now, mutations are basically your skills, your abilities that you'll gain as you go along, and these can actually stack. You can combine them to create better combinations, and obviously this will allow you to get further into the game. You could also be offered cell samples, which are your basic currency that you'll be able to use after a run, so once you've died, to unlock some permanent upgrades, which is always good. Or you could also unlock an attribute, and you have 3 of these being health, deflect and attack, and you can put points into these to basically make these stronger.
Now the titular deflector is actually a key mechanic in the game. Essentially it allows you to either fire back or deflect the enemy's bullets if they're the certain colour, which I believe are the red ones, but you can also deflect your own boomerang. So you fire your boomerang out, and if you deflect it back, it's a slightly faster way of doing damage. And as Glen said, when you put points into your deflection abilities, you can make it a viable source for doing the majority of your damage.
Yeah, the way that you can combine those mutations to create almost your powers of your own, the way that you can use your own bullets and deflect them again to increase their power, the way that you can put points into attributes to shape your character in a way that suits you. I'm much more about health, whereas say Mark, you may go into attack, but then there is that deflect option too. It means that you really do start to merge a lot of good ideas into one. And what also happens is that you can unlock new characters to use, and each of these come with their own attributes, such as the boomerang one that you start with that Mark mentioned. But there's also one that's a bit more close combat with a sword, for example, and this may suit some players better.
Now movement's pretty straightforward. It describes itself as almost like a bullet hell in some ways when you're within that combat, but you can dash in any direction and use that dash to evade those non-deflectable projectiles. Enemies are shown on your character, so what I mean by that is just below your character there are arrows that point you in the direction of where the next one's coming from, unless they're on screen, and then it just changes to a small circle. That's a nice little touch and means you never really lose track of where everyone is.
We touched upon the environmental hazards earlier, and these could be things such as hazardous water, toxic water that you need to stay out of, spikes on the floor, but there's also things such as a huge, almost like a sandworm, I guess, that just charges forward, and you need to make sure you're not in its path when it does so. Again, it just mixes the levels up, adds a nice bit of strategy to what you're already trying to achieve, which is staying alive basically when there are so many enemies on screen.
As with any good addictive roguelite, there's always that balance between risk and reward, and having the choice of the different routes actually allows you to almost plan where you're going to go. You can move the camera and pan it across, and once you've learned the symbols, it allows you to make strategic choices like saving up the game's currency before you head to a shop area.
Yeah, also I mentioned the permanent upgrades that you can purchase between runs. One of the early ones that you can purchase is that you can actually have safe rooms, I believe they're called, that could then potentially turn up within that route, and if you go into one of these, then you can gain a little bit of health, a bit of respite before you go on. So again, it's just a nice way of keeping things different in terms of what you'll see each time, but there's definitely, again, that element of strategy, as Mark just said, in planning your route, because it could be that you want to go after the mutations, it could be you want to try and stack attributes and just make your base character that bit stronger, or it could be that you go after money because you can see there's a shop in the distance.
For me, it wouldn't really be an addictive one unless it had good meta progression. Now this uses cell samples which can be gathered throughout the runs, and you also gain them even if you lose on the final boss after doing amazingly well. And then you take those into the hub area and can use those in a number of different ways. You can put points into either what we would class as passive skills, so those that you don't have to worry about, they're just permanently activated, or you can put them into what's known as active skills.
Yeah, these are more condition based, so it could be that when your health drops below 30%, your attack goes up by a certain percentage, or when you do a certain thing 3 times, it will come into play. So not something you necessarily physically have to activate, but one that isn't always there, as is the case with the passive ones.
Yeah, like something like the Binding of Isaac, you'll unlock essentially new items, but they're called mutations here, and they'll be available within the mutation rooms. Now there are a couple of other game modes as well, aren't there?
Yeah, you have a survival mode that you can try once you unlock it, and there's also a much more difficult mode, again does need to be unlocked, and as well as this there are online leaderboards, which is always a nice touch in such a game, I think.
Yeah, having those online leaderboards makes a big difference for me. I think we're like 20 something, Glenn, that's not great, is it?
We'll get there, it's early days, it's alright. Should we move on to the visuals and the audio now? So in terms of the visuals, as I'm sure you've seen, it almost looks like something like Tron. I think you mentioned Tron as we were playing, has that kind of black and white with a splash of neon through it. But as you also said, each of the different areas has a very different look to it.
Yeah, they'll have their own contrasting colour palettes, but they'll also have different environmental designs. One of them looks a bit more like a futuristic swamp type thing with the neon greens, etc., and the toxic areas. And then the other one is, as Glenn said, much more like old school Tron.
Yeah, it also has a bit of a cel-shaded look to some of the enemies, certainly the bosses, which is nice to see. And those bosses are a nice eclectic mix, aren't they? You have things like almost like a samurai at one point, you have more animalistic characters, but then you have like a huge, I don't know, like a pillar that you have to destroy whilst taking out all of the mini pillars as well. So some nice ideas in terms of those bosses.
Now performance wise, it targets 60 frames per second, and it does manage to maintain that for most of your run. However, we did find when there's a massive amount of on-screen bullets that you will see some drops. Generally though, you're looking at between 50 and 60 frames per second. So in terms of value, well, Deflector costs £20.69 and regional equivalents are on your screen now, but you will be able to get 40% off of this price at launch. 2069 sounds like a date from the future, doesn't it?
Maybe that's the date the game takes place in, who knows?
You're looking at 1.1 gigs to download. It is single player only, obviously with those online leaderboards, and I don't think there's a physical. I can't see anything about that. As for value, well, it's like any good roguelite. You can spend hundreds of hours in these types of games, unlocking all the meta upgrades, getting stronger, but for me it will always be chasing those online scores, you know, on those leaderboards.
Yeah, the fact it has those leaderboards definitely helps in terms of replayability, as well as you said, these games just being replayable in the first place. So that's Deflector. Please do let us know what you think of it in the comment section below. We had a lot of fun with this one. Definitely a nice surprise. If you'd like to potentially win yourself a code for this game, just let us know which game is your favourite roguelite. Just put it down in the comment section below and we will pick someone in the upcoming days. Another big thank you to the publishers for sponsoring this video. Very much appreciated. And a big thank you to each and every one of you, of course, for watching. Don't forget, if you're looking for eShop credit to pick this game up or any other game for that matter, you can do so via our website. You can get your eShop cards from there. SwitchUp.gg. Doing so will get you 5% back in cashback via our tokens, and you can also get another 5% off if you use the code SwitchUp. A big thank you to our patrons and our channel members for your continued support, and until next time, happy gaming.